Kia ora koutou, ko Joe Trinda Takawingoa. Today I'm here to talk to you about John Ansell and Terry Opines. They just had they made a very disturbing video that I've just seen on Facebook, and it was terrible. They're just a complete misunderstanding of the people who they are trying to talk about as Maori, New Zealand Maori. Now, at one part of their video, John presents a chart, and on this chart they're talking about what's called blood quantum. Now, according to John, for people to receive redress under what's called the Treaty of Waitangi, or breaches within the Treaty of Waitangi, they have to have a certain amount of what he calls blood quantum. Now, blood quantum is where one of your parents was European and the other was Indigenous, and so you're only what's considered a half-caste. Well, the problem with blood quantum is they are not Indigenous values. These are European colonial values that were imposed on Indigenous people throughout the entire British Empire to oppress them. These ideologies of eugenics, of fascism, they're not out there to help humanity in any way. So, for example, an example of blood quantum and testing people was that if you didn't reach their expectation of having a certain blood quantum, then you weren't allowed to have land, or you weren't allowed to vote, or you're treated as a second-class citizen. And these are systems that have been introduced across the Anglosphere, Canada, United States, Australia, and New Zealand, to oppress the Indigenous people that they took lands off. Now, when John talks about this, he's talking about treaty breaches that haven't had redress, and so for redress to occur, the people that are receiving the redress for breaches in the Treaty of Waitangi, their descendants, well, they don't have full Maori DNA. Now, there's a huge problem with this expectation from John. Is first off, it's deeply racist. I mean, it's out the gate racism. This is like the crap Adolf Hitler used to talk about. This is straight out of a chapter of Mein Kampf. It's where Adolf Hitler used to talk about the Aryan super race, and that the Jewish people were a parasite on the purebred Aryan race. I mean, it's just batshit crazy stuff to go and talk to people about their eugenics or the amount of blood purity that they have. Because the reality is, there are no Aryan human beings on the planet. Let's start with the British royal family. They're not purebred English, they're Germans. I mean, one of their sons was born in Britain. One of Queen Victoria's sons was born in Britain, went back to Germany, and then attacked Britain and went to war with Britain. I mean, the Queen Elizabeth, her husband is Greek, and that makes all of those descendants Greek as well. I mean, there is no Aryan race. This is a myth amongst humanity, that they're an Aryan race and that you should expect it from any people to be Aryan. Now, the reason why redress should have absolutely nothing to do with the Treaty of Waitangi is really simple. Is in the preamble of the Treaty of Waitangi, it is between the chiefs and tribes of New Zealand. Now, they didn't mention that it was between the purebred Aryan Maori of Aotearoa. There was no mention of that. It was the chiefs, tribes, and families. So here's the thing. Modern day Māori, their descendants, right, are family. Their family signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. That's family. The idea that you only had one Indigenous parent maybe 2 generations ago, that's perfectly fine. They are still family. They will be your family for eternity. They will be your children's family for eternity, and their offspring and their offspring. It doesn't work off bizarre racist ideals of skin pigmentation or blood quantum. So when gentlemen like John Ansell come up with these deranged fascist ideas of people are required to have a certain degree of blood quantum to qualify for redress for land confiscation, that's what treaty settlements and redress are about, is British colonists coming to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and stealing real estate. That's why there is redress. It's not based on strange ideas of blood quantum. It is that land would have been those people's inheritance. And besides, all they're receiving is 2% value of the confiscated estates. I mean, for every $100, they'll get 2. I mean, that's hardly redress. It's rent for 180 years. And by rights, they should be getting the land back in its entirety. So John's taken issue with the use of the word Aotearoa in replacing the word New Zealand. Well, first off, it's actually the other way round. New Zealand replaced Aotearoa as the word for this landmass. So the first man to discover Aotearoa was Kupe, and probably they estimate in around about, with carbon dating, around about 1250 AD. Could possibly be earlier that he came out as an explorer and then went back to form an expedition of the 12 waka that came out to Aotearoa. Now, Kupe was the first human being to discover Aotearoa. The second was Abel Tasman. Now, Abel Tasman decided to rename the place, and he called it Nouvelle-Zélande, which is a French word for a suburb in the Netherlands called Zeeland, where Abel Tasman used to go visit or something. So the thing is that Abel Tasman never set foot on this landmass at all. He was actually stopped and told to go away before he ever set foot. So wherever he got the audacity just to rename it and not ask the people that lived on this landmass what the name of it was, well, I would call that arrogant. And then the third explorer after Abel Tasman, Lieutenant James Cook. Now he comes out, he finds the landmass, he refers to it from charts from Abel Tasman, and then he uses the anglicised version of Nouvelle-Zélande to New Zealand. Now, again, highly arrogant. What are you doing coming out and renaming places that clearly already have been named? Why are you not asking the people that live here? I mean, wouldn't you find that offensive? You live in a township, a street, a home, and some foreigner from the other side of the world just comes around and says, okay, look, I'm renaming everything here because I feel I'm more important than you'll ever be, and you have to live with that name for hundreds of years. I just utter arrogance that you just go and rename places without asking people if it's okay that you rename it, and then you impose that renaming on them. So these ideas that there's some stealth, sneaky sort of Maori scheme to rename Aotearoa, New Zealand to Aotearoa, it's again batshit crazy, because it already was called Aotearoa well before Lieutenant James Cook arrived, or Abel Tasman, because the man that named it in the first place was the first human being to discover the place, was the explorer Kupe, and he should be honoured as the first of our species to find the most beautiful country in the world. Now, another beef I have with John is that he's taking an issue with the renaming of places in Wellington to include Te Reo Māori in place names and libraries, and that he feels that the English language is getting suppressed. Well, he calls it that it is a sinister scheme of communism, and it's the type of leadership by Joseph Stalin, and we're getting Stalinism, and these are more batshit crazy conspiracy theories coming out of John. First off, there is no communism being practiced in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's not happening at all. Māoridom do not subscribe to communism. First off, communism and the Communist Manifesto was written in the 1840s or 1800s by Karl Marx, a German. Māori didn't get around to reading the Communist Manifesto. I've never read it. No one I know who is Māori has sat down to read the Communist Manifesto. We don't subscribe to that ideology. It's a European ideology. What we subscribe to is what's called Indigenous rights. And it's clearly a different ideology and manifesto than the Communist Manifesto. So all he's trying to do is just pretend that any changes to society that Māori are trying to achieve with Indigenous rights to get their culture put in the forefront as a component of New Zealand society is the evil communist Stalingrad type of communist terrible state. And it's batshit crazy because it has nothing to do with communism. These are Indigenous rights, and all that Māori are wanting is to be a component of New Zealand society, and that their language, culture, and just their being in this nation is given as much respect as the foreign culture of the English language from the other side of the world, British culture from the other side of the world. I mean, why are those cultures put on a pedestal right here in the South Pacific? And as for communism, there was actually a history of communism in New Zealand that gets entirely never spoken about. The communism I'm talking about is when Karl Marx moved to London, Britain, because no one would listen to him in Germany, and he started to indoctrinate the very colonists that would soon come out to New Zealand. And guess what happened? They decided to socialise other people's land. They set up communist policies like the New Zealand Settlements Act, which took off the original landowners and gave it to the colonial colonists and communists. So if he wants to look for examples of communism in New Zealand society, well, he only need look in the mirror because he supports it. He's the type that supports land confiscation and that it was better off with the colonial communists than what it was with its original inhabitants. So Mr. Ansell has some really deranged ideas on New Zealand society. I mean, he wants Maori to meet his expectations on blood quantum. He refuses to permit the Maori language to be a strong component, or Maori culture to be a strong component of New Zealand society. He's trying to block the use of the word Aotearoa, which is New Zealand's first place name. Before ever anyone came out and said, oh, there's Nouvelle-Zélande, or there's New Zealand, everyone called the place Aotearoa. 100% of the New Zealand population before 1st of October 1773 called this land Aotearoa. What John Ansell wants, and this is what I feel that he wants, and Terry Opines, his mate, what I feel they want is they want a strictly Anglo-Saxon society in the South Pacific. They want a better Britain of the South Pacific. They don't want this rascally Polynesian Maori culture rearing its ugly head. They want racial purity and cultural purity, and the only things that matter are British things. The British language, the English language, and British culture. And these uppity Maori people need just be quiet and seen and not heard. I mean, here's the deal with that crap, is tourists don't come out halfway around the world to see our ballet. They go to Russia for that. They don't come round halfway around the world to see someone wearing a kilt playing the bagpipes. They don't come halfway around the world to watch our New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, because they go to New York for that, to see their symphony orchestra, or Berlin. We're not renowned for being a great European cultural hub, because we're not. We never will be, because we're not in Europe. Lo and behold, we live down the bottom in the South Pacific. We're in the middle of Polynesia. People come halfway around the world to see our foremost professional sports team, the All Blacks, do the haka. And this is Maori culture, Polynesian culture. They come halfway around the world to watch kapa haka. They want to experience a world of the South Pacific that is pre-European. I mean, if you want to experience European culture, go to Europe. I mean, it's really abundant there. But trying to find it here in the South Pacific, yeah, nah, mate. Yeah, nah. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And kia ora.